Welcome back to Brandersation.
A conversation about Brandon Sanderson.
Would you like to destroy some evil today?
Absolutely. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Warnings for spoilers. In this episode, we will be talking about all of the Stormlight Archive books. Books 1 through 4. I wish we were talking about 5, but...
soon enough.
Today we're going to be talking about the character of Adolin Kholin, and we are definitely probably pronouncing his name wrong. It is almost definitely Adolin.
I'd say it's definitely Adolin, but we've both been saying Adolin this whole time and only recently realized we were wrong, so we're probably just sticking with it.
I know we're only on episode 2 of the podcast, and I think it would be expected that we'd maybe just be discussing Kaladin, Dalinar, Shallan, but I just think Adolin is an underrated character who doesn't get as much love.
Agreed. I mean, I always forget when I'm discussing Way of Kings that he's a point of view character for multiple chapters. I kind of just always forget that there's more than the main 3.
Yeah, and there's not much mystery to his past, so it totally makes sense. All the other 3 that we just mentioned have things in their past that you're trying to discover. I love him as a character, and I think he becomes a bigger character in Rhythm of War, and so it's kind of worthwhile going back and looking at him from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's unlikely that he will ever have his own point of view book. I do think he is underrated.
Yeah.
Even though, there's no reason. He's great.
So, Sophie, what was your maybe first impressions of him when he was introduced into the book, or just first impressions in Way of Kings?
First impressions in Way of Kings were definitely not highly positive because I had it recommended to me by Loretta and our sister, and Dalinar is just her all-time favorite character. Mm-hmm. So I heard a lot about Dalinar before I ever started reading the books and just assumed he was the best. And so the first time you meet Dalinar or Adolin is when they're on their way to the Chasm Fiend hunt. Mm-hmm. And Adolin is just thinking oh boy, I think my dad might be going crazy. And I'm like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Having no clue of what the context is.
Immediately assuming that Dalinar knows exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, immediately assuming he's just, the rebellious teenager who's just going to be obnoxious. And then, oh boy, I was very wrong in that first impression. What were yours, do you think?
Yeah, I think similar in that, Dalinar is set up. He has a lot of gravitas. He's very respectable, and you kind of are aware that he's going to be a main character. So initially, you're immediately sort of, Dalinar clearly knows what he's talking about. He's super competent. Adolin, you're just his kid. But at the same time, I think that Adolin has some things that maybe you read about that you kind of expect him to be this rebellious teenager character because he's clearly a sort of womanizer, and I guess he drinks too, but which is against what Dalinar believes soldiers should do. You don't pass him off because in his interior thoughts he is very conflicted about Dalinar. He's very everyone in camp is making fun of Dalinar. People that Adolin thinks should respect Dalinar think that because Dalinar has been acting strangely and is not as aggressive and doesn't care about getting all the gem hearts and all of the intricate politics between all the houses, then he thinks that Dalinar is weakening, but he respects him so much. He has so much turmoil, and because Dalinar has been having those fits during the high storms, he thinks he's maybe going crazy, but he loves Dalinar. So yeah. I think that immediately you're set up to be sympathetic towards Adolin because he's one of the few people who defends Dalinar because he's his son, but on the inside he is wondering, is my father going crazy? And he's kind of embarrassed of his father, whilst also, I always have to get a whilst into this podcast every time. I always have a whilst.
Whilst counter up on the screen.
Yeah. Well, he's embarrassed of Dalinar, but he's also fiercely loyal to Dalinar, which I think already sets him up as a complex character.
Oh, yeah. And he clearly, even in his first point of view, has a lot of positive traits. He's clearly got like a lot of grit and is just kind of, putting up with people's remarks about his dad and not like letting it slide. He's clearly angry, but he's also not, jumping down everybody's throats about, you stop talking about my dad, you stop talking about my
Well,
dad.
it's like a little bit, I
A
think.
little bit, but not.
He
It has to get to a point.
Yeah.
He's not like hackles raised about it. At this point, it's clearly something that he is used to and is not happy about.
Yeah. Yeah, and it must be a very hard position to be in because of how much he respects Dalinar. But Dalinar is acting really strangely because the Alethi, so much of what the Alethi, the foundation of their culture is fighting and
Conflict.
Yeah, conflict and who's the best, who does the best in battle and all that. So
everything's a competition.
Yeah, exactly. And so because Dalinar is stepping back, and Dalinar is actually viewing the war from like a very normal way you would view wars, which is like, let's get out of this war as soon as possible, whereas the Alethi are thriving in war. So you do see he basically just more conflict between him and Dalinar, with Dalinar asking him to investigate the attempted murder of the king.
Yeah, and he like disguises the fact that he's investigating by just like bringing women with him wherever he's going on dates, and they're all like, why are we here at this like leather worker looking at saddles? And he's like, you'll have a great time.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he's clever, and he is likable, he's charming, and he's liked throughout the camp too. Like, he's a popular guy.
He's very charismatic.
Yeah. So where do we start seeing development in him and change in him, would you say? Like, is there a turning point?
I think, seeing Dalinar jump into action and catch that chasm fiend that was about to kill the king was definitely a, wow, my dad is not out of the game. That was awesome. But then afterward, like, why isn't he like that all the time?
Yeah.
And, taking steps to investigate the possibility that someone's trying to assassinate the king. And there's not a whole lot of growth necessarily. More you just kind of get to know him a little better.
Yeah.
Until toward the end of the Way of Kings, when Sadeas betrays them and leaves them to die mid-battle. And Adolin has strongly disliked Sadeas this entire time, as most likely have most readers.
Hopefully. Yeah. And Dalinar also urges Adolin to not hate Sadeas. Now I'm not going to remember how I say it. Sadeas.
Just think sadist.
Yeah. Adolin despises him, and he knows that Dalinar doesn't like him either, but Dalinar still tells him to respect him due to the part that he played in trying to save Gavilar's life, the first king, back at the beginning. And so he has respect for him, and Adolin does admire that about Dalinar, even though he's completely frustrated, like he wants to just be able to despise him and get rid of him. And he doesn't want Dalinar to tell him to respect him, but that, I think, adds to his respect for his father, is this ability to be humble and to try to work together. I mean, Dalinar thinks that they have to all unite, and so he doesn't want to cause conflict.
So yeah, clearly a man who loves and respects his father, but does not necessarily see eye to eye with him.
That, and Adolin as a warrior, Adolin is one of the best duelists. Yeah, duelists. He's an amazing fighter, and he's wanted to be like his father, and he's only heard these amazing stories. But now that by the time Adolin's actually old enough to participate in battle with his father doesn't want to really fight anymore. But I think he's always wanted Dalinar's approval, and so he's viewed Dalinar as an amazing warrior. If he's an amazing warrior, Dalinar will approve of him. By the time he is an amazing warrior, Dalinar doesn't live that lifestyle that Adolin knows of.
I mean, it's clear that Adolin loves, dueling, not just as like, oh, I'll be a good fighter and my dad will appreciate me. Like, clearly that's a part of it, that to go to battle with his father in this great war. But it's also just something he is fantastic at and does have a passion for on his own.
Yeah.
So not everything about him is directed solely towards needing approval from his father.
And he does not do everything for his father's approval. Clearly, he doesn't follow the codes completely. He wants to wear the certain fancier uniforms and
drink
such.
a lot.
Yeah.
Womanize a lot.
Yeah, so he is himself to a certain extent, but even in that comes probably a certain guilt of not feeling like he's living up to his father's expectations. When Sadeas abandons them and Dalinar is completely crushed, he thinks that all his men, he led his men to death, basically. And then when Adolin says, he doesn't say, I forgive you. He doesn't even blame him. He says, it's not your fault, father. Like, you did your best. You thought that you could trust Sadeas. The fact that he doesn't blame his father is a beautiful point. That's a really mature thing for him to say. And Dalinar, I'm sure, is obviously appreciative. And then that allows Dalinar to be able to continue fighting in the battle. Words of Radiance when Kaladin's put in jail, only when he's released to find that Adolin insisted on being in jail as well in solidarity of Kaladin's cause. That's a great moment, because that sort of begins their friendship, because there's been a lot of tension between the two of them. Adolin is kind of demeaning to Kaladin. Kaladin is the bridge man, calls him bridge boy.
Yeah, and Kholin hates Adolin because he's like, a light eyes fop who just orders everyone about and wants people to lick his boots and all that. And like, Adolin doesn't like Kholin because he's just this rando who's suddenly in charge of his father's, like, the king's guard.
Yeah.
And who's just acting very suspiciously and obviously hiding things. So they do not get along at all, which is sad, because as the reader, you really like both of them. But you can also totally see why they hate each other. But Adolin is quite mean to him for a good portion of the book.
Yeah. But that's when I start to see that friendship develop. Adolin, we see fighting in that duel where he makes the mistake of telling his opponent to bring whoever he wants, assuming that he would just bring a friend, so he'd be fighting against 2 shard bearers. But then, to his unfortunate surprise, the guy brings 3 other shard bearers, so Adolin finds himself fighting against 4 shard bearers.
Yeah.
And obviously we could have a whole episode on that scene, Kaladin jumping in. Amazing.
That's just bothering me. I feel like it's 6. I do not know why. I feel like that's something about, like, there's a rule that you can have half as many or something, which is why Renarin and Kaladin can fight with him. Or something. I'm just not sure.
Maybe we should look into it. Okay, so maybe it's 6 shard bearers. We'll put the number right here.
Yeah, with a little, like, halo over who got it right.
Okay.
Like, he knows when he's outmatched, which is very seldom, because he's a
good warrior, yeah. But then when Kaladin comes and saves him, and also Renarin comes in to help a little bit, then that also solidifies more of their relationship. So their friendship continues on, and that actually is a reason why I like Adolin, especially later on, is his ability to, he's so charming and he's fun loving, and he understands that sometimes Kaladin gets in these funks, and Kaladin is just a little depressed, and he'll come in and sort of invite him along to hang out with him, like at a bar or something like that.
They're buddies, but there is a little bit of conflict because of the relationship with Shallan.
Oh, true that.
Or Shallan. I say
Shallan.
I say Shallan. Adolin's introduction to Shallan in Words of Radiance is, like, very wholesome and funny, because he's just like, that is a woman who I've not seen before. I know every woman around here. I have not seen her, and I like her, and I want to meet her. And it's like, before knowing anything about her, he just sees her across the room and is like, okay, I want to go hang out with her. And it's very wholesome. And they, get betrothed and fall in love, and it's great. And then in Oathbringer, there's some conflict because of Shallan sort of being very internally conflicted in many ways, one of which is being kind of into Kaladin, but also very much she loves Adolin.
Yeah, but it is kind of nice that neither Kaladin or Adolin like go to blows over something like that.
Yeah, there's no like Dwight and Andy card duel over affection
Oh,
going
no.
on.
Let's do this thing!
They're here for each other in ways that they definitely would not have been, like in book 1 and probably even in book 2.
There's a lot of maturing that happens between both of them, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of maturing that happens, like with Adolin in particular as well, now that he's like, got one woman and is focused on keeping her.
Oh, we have to talk about, we've been talking about how much we like him and how he's been maturing, but then we have to talk about him killing Sadius.
Yeah, so that came out of nowhere for me.
So shocking.
You've known this whole time how much Adolin hates Sadius, and you're like, yeah, we're right there with you. We hate Sadius. Everybody hates Sadius.
Mm-hmm.
He's the worst. When they find his dead body, they're just like, that's one less thing to worry about.
Yep, he's dead.
Yep, he's dead.
Yeah, everyone is relieved. Oh man, it is so tricky.
But
It's like you're even happy too that the guy's gone, but the death is so sudden and brutal that it's just like, it really kind of leaves you with this foul taste in your mouth.
yeah, and it's especially rough because it's a twisting of what was previously an extremely positive trait for Adolin, which was his protectiveness of his family.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of Words of Radiance, Sadius is pretty much blatantly threatening him and his family and saying, you're never going to get rid of me. I'm always going to be messing things up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And he has tried to get them killed previously. He is an active threat
Yeah.
right there. And they're alone in a hallway and Adolin murders him. And it's really horrifying.
Yeah.
It's a part in the book that I will probably skip when I reread it.
It feels like self-defense, but he didn't. It would only have really felt like self-defense if Sadius had then like pulled a sword on him and tried to kill him, and then if Adolin had killed him, it would have been completely different. But
Or even if it was like a brawl that descended into a life or death fight, but it just, Adolin stabs him
right in the face.
right in the face.
Taking justice into his own hands, really. You can't, if Adolin can do it, then anyone can do it. So that's chaos. But if no one does it, who's going to die because Sadius is alive? Like, it doesn't feel like there's an easy answer.
And it's like Adolin has been growing to be a little more like his father, not in like attitude necessarily, but in terms of just, he seems like he's becoming a much better man.
Yeah.
And I think he even says, like, to Sadius, my father thinks I'm a better man than he is. Unfortunately for you, he's wrong. And then kills him.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I thought you were a better man than your father too, and now I don't know what to think. He does not regret killing Sadius.
Yeah.
And if I were in his position, maybe I wouldn't either. As an outside viewer, though, it's such a sudden, really upsetting event.
Yes. Which I think then takes us to the conversation with Dalinar, the Rhythm of War conversation. And
Who at this point I think does know.
yeah, so Dalinar knows, and Dalinar is expressing, he's expressing to Adolin that he is worried that Adolin's going to become like Taravangian. Dalinar has been having these conversations with Taravangian, where Taravangian has revealed that he believes the ends justify the means. You can do whatever evil as long as the end is good. I mean, and Dalinar clearly doesn't believe in that, and he does not think. This is part of the reason why Dalinar is so great. Dalinar sticks to his principles, and he does not believe that, and he's worried that his son is going to become like that.
Thinking about in Oathbringer the many conversations Dalinar had with Taravangian, where Taravangian was saying it's up to the rulers to do the terrible things for their subjects, so that their subjects don't have to do the bad things. We have to do it because they have to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adolin, who seems to be getting set up to be a ruler or a guy in charge, or just, he's very capable, doing this exact thing that lines up so clearly with Taravangian's philosophy.
Yeah.
Is
just worrisome
a
for
big
Dalinar.
red flag.
Yeah, and that particular conversation is so hard because Adolin can sense that Dalinar is disappointed in him. And it's sort of, and this is Adolin has now discovered Dalinar's past at this point. Adolin has this good relationship with his father, and then he finds out why his father has changed. That Blackthorn was a terrible, terrible person, and
war criminal among many other terrible
a war
things.
criminal, and because of his terrible war crimes, i.e., burning down an entire city, accidentally kills his own wife and Adolin's mother. And Adolin now has to come to terms with this man who he has seen turn his whole life around and stick to the code, stick to his principles, and do so many good things. And he has to listen to this man who he's looked up to for so long tell him that he's worried that he's going to be bad when all Adolin's thinking about, but you were like, who are you to say that? But it's you understand both viewpoints. Dalinar is super worried Adolin has become someone like him, and Dalinar, he looks like a hypocrite by saying, like, you need to be much more careful about what you do. But even in that section, Adolin, is thinking, I love this man. I love Dalinar, but he is so hard to live with sometimes.
I know. Oh my gosh. Adolin has a lot of charity in his heart.
It's really hard because Adolin can sense that Dalinar disapproves of him. And Dalinar, because he disapproves of him, can't say things like, I'm proud of you, son. He doesn't even say, like, I love you or anything like that in that conversation. This could be the last time he sees Adolin. Adolin's going off on an ambassador trip that could lead to death.
Yeah, and all he's doing really is like, well, there will be opportunities for you to do better. Mm-hmm. And at this point, you're like, are you kidding me? Adolin has done so much.
Yeah.
All you're seeing is the really terrible thing that he did.
Yeah.
Which is not something you should, like, look past.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the last thing Adolin needs to hear right now is like, well, right now you're doing badly. Later you'll do well. I know. And it's like, he's not saying that blatantly, but it's kind of there. Like, I'm sure you'll bond to Spren eventually. I'm sure you'll learn from this experience, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I think because Dalinar is such a man of principle, he probably thinks that if he were to say something like, I love you, Adolin, or I'm still proud of you and all that stuff, then it's encouraging Adolin, what Adolin did and what Adolin might now do. Whereas I think you can I know that Dalinar could balance both by disagreeing with what Adolin did and being worried about him for sure, but still expressing to him. I think that's what Adolin needs, because that's what Adolin has wanted his whole life. And Adolin has felt he has been physically and emotionally neglected by Dalinar his whole up until Dalinar turns his life around after forgetting what he did. And so Adolin, to be fair, he got more attention than Renarin because he was a good warrior, and so Dalinar did pay more attention to him.
And because he was the firstborn, and
yeah.
Dalinar was there when he was born, and it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then, like, oh, there's another kid now. When did that happen?
Yeah, and he's not good with swords, so all Dalinar knows is fighting, and so of course he's gonna be. But even though even though he does show more attention to Adolin, it's really barely there. And Adolin only wants to impress him with his ability to fight and his ability to be a good soldier, and his father just constantly disapproving of him and stuff like that. So Adolin is just sort of, my sympathies lie more with Adolin, even though I love Dalinar.
The trait about Adolin that I always think of as like my favorite trait is how it is impossible to like put him down.
Yeah.
He's just not that kind of person. He's very, like, not necessarily silver linings type, not always like, oh, it'll all be fine type, but, like, he's just always positive.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's a flashback in Oathbringer of when Dalinar, like, corrects Adolin for something. And for a second, Adolin's kind of downcast and then just, like, immediately fixes it. And Dalinar's like, it is really impossible for this kid to be upset. And, like, there's something very wholesome about it, but he's probably just the only character in that series to consistently be, like,
Positive.
positive.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's actually true.
so many characters are like so guilty or depressed or conflicted at all times, and Adolin experiences those too, but he's just always like actively positive, even when like on the inside there's a conflict or there's confusion or guilt or upset. He's still just like, well, I'm just gonna keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And I love that about him. It's
Yeah.
what makes him especially unique.
And then I think that then makes you feel more defensive of him when Dalinar thinks he's comforting Adolin, but instead he just makes Adolin feel worse by saying like, oh well, Spren have bonded with your brother Narns, Spren has bonded with me somehow. I'm sure you'll get one too. You'll become a Knights Radiant just like the rest of us, which is just, all that does is make Adolin feel more like a failure. Even though Adolin is one of the few characters, he's one of the few characters who doesn't have any sort of like magical abilities, but he is so capable. He takes on like a really insane amount of men single-handedly with no magical abilities and defeats them. Like Adolin is totally capable without any of the magical gifts that some of the other people have.
He's incredibly capable in battle. He's a very competent leader. He's very intelligent, not necessarily super like sharp-witted, but he's very like alert, and
He's a good soldier.
He's a great soldier. He's very like good at reading people.
He's sort of sensitive, kind of a bit. He has sympathy with his whole relationship with Maya is one that we definitely need to talk about. No other people who had a Shardblade had any connection with the Spren involved. Well, the dead Spren in the Shardblade. Like, he respected that. We can tell from the beginning that he respects his sword and is thankful to his sword. And doesn't he kind of like he talks to it. And so then as a result, when he's able to see his sword when they're in Shadesmar and it's a dead Spren, what is it?
A Deadeye.
Deadeye, yeah. His care for Maya and all that is not only just shows his good character, but it's essential to the story.
And even before that point, his relationship with Maya is very incredible, because like this whole time he's just had a very unique relationship with his sword, which to everyone else it's just like, it's a sword, it's a tool.
Yeah.
And I don't remember which book it's in, first or second. He's practicing throwing his shard blade because it will dematerialize if they're not touching it. But he's practicing throwing it and keeping it materialized so that it'll hit a target and then vanish. And everyone's like, how are you doing that? And it's like, he already has clearly this relationship with his sword. At one point he summons it in seven heartbeats instead of 10.
Yeah.
Because he's like, please, Maya. And she responds quicker.
Yes.
So clearly there's a response there, which no one else knows about. Everyone thinks Deadeyes are just beyond any help at all. And no matter how competent he was during the trial in Rhythm of War, which he was, he handled it really well. It was rigged. They weren't going to listen to him no matter what, or no matter how well he did. So he's still, but because he has like kindled this relationship with Maya, she is therefore able to help him there. Yeah. It's so good.
It's so good. We have to address this one YouTuber, Murphy Napier, I think is her last name. I really respect her, and I've loved watching her videos since I got into Sanderson because she's a fan and she always has some really good things to say. But she and her husband do a review and discussion of Oathbringer. I'll link the video down below, and maybe we'll have to put the clip in the podcast.
I think that he's a phenomenal character, but I think that he is the least well-written character of all of our mains, mostly just because there's just, with everything that Adolin went through, like, he had a horrible father. He had a monster of a father. And he had to constantly perform in order to get his father's affection. And even when he was performing correctly, sometimes his father was still horrible to him. Right. He could have some PTSD too. He could have some depression too.
Yeah, so we definitely disagree with what she says about him not being well written, and that she thinks he should have more trauma, PTSD, depression. Like there should be more wrong with him that he has to internally struggle with. Like part of the reason why I love him so much is that you were talking about his positivity, and he's not really like the other people. Maybe that's why he's not a Knight's Radiant, is because he doesn't have enough depression.
Yeah,
he doesn't have a bad past.
He has wholesomeness, which is why he has Maya and that sort of strange spread in human relationship, which no one else has, because he's not negative enough to have a spread.
Yeah, but I think also, like, when we look back at his past, I think that, first of all, Adolin is actually struggling with more than we've really seen a lot of. I think we're seeing he's positive and such, but he is really struggling with this sort of resentment he feels towards his father, and also the fact that he is, I think part of the reason why Adolin is not at peace with his relationship with his father is because he feels guilty that Dalinar doesn't approve of the things that he does, even though he believes that things that he's done are right. So he still believes certain things, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have the feelings of guilt involved.
Yeah, so it's not so much I'm guilty because I murdered someone as I'm upset because my father doesn't because I did something my father does not approve of.
Yeah, and I think that's rooted in his childhood.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why I think that he's a positive and sensitive and kind person is because he was raised by his mother and not by his father.
Yeah.
If he had been raised by Dalinar as Dalinar was, then who knows what Adolin would have turned into.
Not good.
Yeah.
For sure, not good.
But that doesn't change the fact, even though objectively we know he would have been better, he's better off not having been raised by Dalinar as Dalinar was in the past. That doesn't mean that he wasn't still striving for and looking for like a healthy father-son relationship.
Because obviously he didn't know as a kid like how terrible Dalinar was, because his mother was only saying positive things about Dalinar, and like in Adolin's mind, all he knows is his father is like the greatest soldier of all time and just wants to be like his father.
Yeah, exactly. Then you start to get, though, so physically Dalinar's hardly ever around. When he is around,
he's drunk,
or he's,
having an argument,
not being very
with
kind.
his wife or something.
Yeah, Adolin is also not getting any type of emotional intimacy when he's a child, which I think is super important. That could be a part of the reason why Adolin is such a womanizer at the beginning too, is any type of emotional intimacy, he didn't experience that from his father. And some people, that lack of something very vital in a child's development can manifest itself in many ways. For Adolin, possibly the fact that he has like 100 girlfriends and constantly like cycling through women is just, he's not necessarily used to intimacy in an emotional level.
Yeah, I think he even says, I think to Kaladin, which is a little weird because I can't remember the context, but he says something along the lines of like, I have no problem getting women, I just can't keep them. Just kind of sums it up. Yeah.
I mean, he's charming and he's likable, but for whatever reason, he can't keep his girlfriends around. And I think he's thoughtless with them, and he hurts their feelings. I don't think he's ever malicious with them, but he is thoughtless, and that's also problematic.
It's like a little bit of like subconscious sabotaging.
But potentially he's actually not meeting women that he is actually interested in dating, but he's just kind of like dating them for the sake of dating them. And who knows if that's connected. I would say, I don't know if Sanderson is necessarily purposely connecting those things, but it seems to me like a perfectly legitimate thing to think of and why he might struggle.
For sure.
Because it makes sense. Renarin does clearly have something that he's really struggling with. I mean, he's awkward. He has health issues. He's socially kind of inept, and clearly he never had a relationship with Dalinar even close to what Adolin had, which was barely anything.
And anytime Dalinar like extends like noticeable affection towards Renarin, you can tell Renarin is like over the moon about it. It means so much to him.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's much more like noticeably struggling with it than Adolin is.
Yes.
And to have Adolin just be like more depressed or more traumatized by not having a better relationship with his father growing up. It's like, well, that's Renarin.
Yeah.
Adolin is just he's a different type of person.
Yeah.
And like Dalinar was thinking, it's just like not really possible to keep him down. It's just in his nature to like just get back up and bounce back up and just kind of keep going.
And I think that children also respond different. Yeah, children will respond differently to a neglectful parent. So while Renarin becomes much more like interiorly inclined, he's very quiet and reflective, and probably he's sensitive in a sort of jumpy way, like he is nervous and, you know, more worried and anxiety. Whereas other children, I think, become a lot more brash, hot-headed, impulsive. They've been taking care of themselves this whole time, so they're going to keep taking care of themselves. And then we get Adolin is hot-headed. Adolin is more independent than Renarin. So I think children respond differently. So I think, I just disagree with the point that Adolin is not well written, because I think it's just a different type of way of dealing with what he dealt with as a kid.
Yeah, he's just so different from all of the other protagonists so far in the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah.
He's honestly more like a Shonai than like any of the other protagonists I can think of.
Yeah.
Just like cheerful, determined, trying to make sure that everyone he cares about is okay.
Oh, I think Sanderson actually did write a really, really good character, and someone who's really complex. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the series. Who knows? Adolin might decide that he just is allowed to kill whoever he thinks is going to get in his way, and he is going to become like Taravangian. I don't really know. I hope not.
I hope not. I think we might get some interesting parent-child dynamics, given that he's now like happily married to Shallan.
Oh my gosh, if they have a baby, what's going to happen? He's going to be such a good dad, actually.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I really would love to see how, given his relationship with his father, what he would be like as a parent. I think it would be fascinating. So I would love to see that.
And well, thank you for joining us again for our second episode. We're really happy to be back, and we're really happy to have you back with us.
Yeah. Assuming you're back with us.
Assuming you're back.
You could be a new person, in which case, welcome. Hi.
Well, goodbye.
Bye.
Woo! Woo!